If you are somebody who's lost your appetite to the point where you're eating less than 1,400 calories a day as a grown ass woman, you are likely in a position where you could put that weight back on rapidly.
You've just tuned in to Rebel Wellness. I'm your host, Kaileigh, also known as Coach Kales, integrative clinical nutritionist in training, fitness pro of over a decade, and the woman who refused to accept normal when my body was screaming otherwise. If you're the high achiever who's been told your blood work is perfect while you're secretly Googling why you feel like garbage, if you're crushing it at work but your energy crashes at 3 p.m. and your cycle just feels off, or maybe you've been gaslit by providers who dismiss your symptoms as just stress, and you know something deeper is going on, you're my people. Here's where functional medicine meets real talk strategy. I created this podcast as your resource to take back the driver's seat on your health journey. Women are incredibly intuitive, and I'm here to help you reconnect with that voice. This isn't about perfection or another protocol to fail at. It's about finally getting the answers your body has been begging for and the tools that actually work in your real, messy, beautiful life. Less noise, more nourishment. Let's dive in. So you did the thing. You took the GLP-1. You lost the weight. Maybe you hit your goal. Maybe the cost became unsustainable. Maybe the side effects weren't worth it anymore. Or maybe your insurance just stopped covering it. All stories I hear constantly and have had to walk side by side with clients to find solutions for the last several years now, especially. And now you're standing at this crossroads thinking, what now? Will I gain it back? Was this all for nothing? Did I waste all that money? Here's what no one really talks about, though, when they hand you that prescription. What happens when you stop? Unfortunately, it's kind of because it made it onto the scene and blew up rapidly. And so many doctors were getting asked by clients and patients about getting on this med, and they had access to prescribing it, and they did not get enough education on understanding the whole world of what happens when you go on it, what you should stop doing, what you should be paying attention to. And I actually am going to be making a new episode to kind of cover that now that we've had a little bit or a lot of it more firsthand experiences and science behind starting a GLP-1 and what to expect and all of that kind of stuff. Because I know for a lot of my listeners, that's an important discussion that I find is not had from the experiential side. A lot of times they tend to just focus on what the pharmaceutical company puts in their pamphlets for them and whatnot. So stay tuned for a near future episode on that if you're somebody who is starting GLP-1s. But this episode, you're probably here because you've been on one, you want to come off, or you're planning to come off at some point. And it's a lot more specific to those who used it for weight loss. And first things first, I have no judgment for anybody who uses these for weight loss. It's so wildly available at this point now through compounding pharmacies and FDA regulated insurance-based pharmacies. And so it's something that, I think a lot of people are starting to understand that it has multiple reasons it can be used, whether it's addiction, weight loss, diabetes management. It's not only for diabetics. And because of the world of compounded semaglutide and tirzepatide and the other tides that are coming to the market, it's really important to think about the various ways this medication could be helping somebody in a life-changing way, whether that is, body image based or addiction based. This med has been very helpful for a lot of my past clients who have been using it for getting off of even casual use of alcohol and casual use of overeating sweets and sugary things and their cravings essentially. And it comes with cost, though. It always comes with a cost. But I definitely just kind of wanted to say that starting off this episode, because if you are somebody who maybe secretly used GLP-1 and you got to your goal weight and now you want to come off of it and you are still just trying to keep it on the DL, I do hope that I definitely recommend everything. This episode is not medical advice. It's education and empowerment, but it is something to make sure that you are working with a practitioner if you did use a med like this, because it is something that is altering your physiological state more than you may know. So you don't want to be doing these things kind of on your own without informed practitioners that can walk you through it and keep an eye on certain markers, etc. So, with all of that said, what happens when you stop? And here's the thing, if you're navigating this transition, again, you are not alone. This is what all the people who started it last year or the year before and never wanted to be on it for a lifetime are pretty much coming up against. So this podcast episode is probably great timing because, this is the next step, right? And so brand new research that was published in JAMA looked at over 125,000 people on these medications. And the data is really eye-opening. So I'm going to dive into the real science of discontinuation today with you guys, per the request of one of our listeners who's had amazing progress herself, which is awesome. And what's actually happening to your body when you come off these meds is really important to understand. So I'm going to discuss that, why weight regain is so common. And spoiler alert, it has nothing to do with your willpower, and fascinating patterns around who restarts and why. And most importantly, the evidence-backed strategies to help you maintain your progress or minimize that regain. But again, not medical advice. This is just education. So let's get into it. And I do want to add an important disclaimer that this episode is talking to you who've used it for anything other than a medical condition like diabetes that your provider prescribed you with, okay? We are not discussing those of you who are using a GLP-1 medication for diabetes or any other specific health condition that you are working on with your prescriber, okay? These are actually very helpful tools should you be somebody who had adverse reactions to the med and you do have something that is diagnosed. However, I don't want to say at all that this is what you should be doing. You should always be working with your practitioner. However, for those of you who used it for weight loss, you kept it at a lower dose or a lowest effective dose, this is going to be very helpful information for you, but again, not medical advice. Okay, so first let's talk about what is actually happening out there, because I think you'll be really surprised, like I was, or maybe kind of relieved to hear this, because there's so much interesting information around this that I think a lot of people don't know that is like, it's actual like true data. It's not what we hear, because social media and even just word of mouth, TV, whatever, is pretty much where most of the misinformation and like shame and judgment and blowing up, like catastrophizing statistics is like there. So hopefully all this next little section for you is kind of helpful. So in that massive JAMA study in 2025 that was published earlier this year that followed 125,000 adults, more than half of the people discontinued their GLP-1 within 1 year. And by 2 years, that number jumped to 72%. So most people plan to be on GLP-1 medications for 1 to 2 years. So that is really normal if you utilize this med and you were just kind of committing in your head to this short-term chapter of your life where you were really hoping to see some either habit changes, again, kind of talking about those different addiction-like pathways that GLP-1 can help reduce or improve upon, or weight loss, the most common one, likely the reason you're here, right? So again, for people who have been using it for weight loss without diabetes, they stopped within the first year and pretty much for sure by 2 years. And the median time people stayed on treatment was literally only 176 days. So that's about 6 months. Other regional data showed that similar patterns, with the average duration being around 7 months, was kind of a common pattern that they had noticed. But it is really interesting for me, especially as a clinician and working with a lot of clients that are utilizing this medication, especially for like weight loss and or like inflammation. I guess that's another really common one that is being used at a more of a microdose level, but pretty much majority of the people don't really want to be on it for longer than 2 years. That's kind of the bottom line. So if you're coming off these meds, you are literally in the majority. This is not a you problem. This is a systemic, widespread experience that people are, making that decision. So in this research study by JAMA, they looked at what factors predicted discontinuation, and here's what they mostly found. For every 1% of weight you lost on the medication, you were 3.3% less likely to stop taking it. And so basically, the better it worked, the more likely you were going to stay on it. That makes total sense, right? I would say from my own personal experience with my clients, that is a very common um, situation that they come up against as well. Another major contributor for why people stopped was the moderate to severe GI effects. So, anything from the pancreatitis, gastroparesis, gallbladder issues, not just nausea. A lot of people actually do quit because of the nausea. They just really hate the nausea. That is one of the most common ones that I have heard from firsthand experience. So, pairing with the science, that makes a lot of sense. And those people experiencing any of those symptoms had the likelihood of stopping by 19%, so roughly 20%. And what's kind of interesting is that people who experienced these side effects were 18% less likely to restart the medication later. So they had a bad reaction or a bad side effect, whatever you want to call it. And then they were like, yeah, no, that's not for me. I'm not going to do it again. Some of the other most common factors were plateau in weight loss, life circumstances changing, again, the insurance component, which brings me to like one of the major ones that a lot of people stopped is that the income level was significantly affected because it was so much more expensive for everyone who was not diabetic and couldn't get it through insurance because their insurance didn't cover it. You know what I mean? So, that's the place where a lot of these compounding pharmacies like Orderly Meds that you guys have heard me talk about before came into the picture to kind of fill that gap because even the founder's origin story was because that happened to him. Okay, with all those interesting facts combined, the reinitiation that is really interesting and kind of fascinating to me. This is also why I want you to think of this less as quitting as much as it's more of managing a chronic condition. So, of the people who stopped their GLP-1, 36% of those without diabetes restarted within a year, and nearly half restarted within 2 years. The biggest predictor of restarting was weight regain. Kind of why you're probably here, because that is exactly what you don't want to happen, right? And so for every 1% of weight somebody regained after stopping, they were roughly 3% more likely to start the medication again. And people who lost more weight during their initial treatment were somewhat more likely to restart. And those who stayed on longer initially were more likely to come back to it because it was familiar and they had done it before for a lot longer. You know what I mean? So if it was basically somebody who used it for longer than half a year and did not have significant adverse reactions or symptoms like side effects, then they pretty much were probably going to be a candidate to come back onto the med. So, knowing all of this now, how do we kind of reframe this concept? Because you're probably thinking, like, Kales, this is just telling me that I'm probably going to start the med again. And that is not the goal. So, this whole cycle of the stopping, regaining, restarting is not failure. The researchers explicitly state that obesity is a chronic disease requiring ongoing treatment, and inequities in access to these medications have the potential to exacerbate health disparities. So we need to think about obesity more like we think about cancer, requiring intensive treatment upfront, followed by close monitoring long term with a better action plan and understanding that like flare-ups can happen and some things may go differently for one person than it does for you. So closing out kind of that topic a little bit about the research for those of you who do enjoy hearing about the statistics of, literally 125,000 other people like you. This is hope that people are better understanding that this is complex. And that is a lot of what I based my research on and have worked on with clients to help curb the regain and come off of the med better, which we will get to at the end of this episode. But let's talk about next what's actually happening in your body, because I think it's really important to understand the biology so that you can understand what you need to tune into. So when you're on GLPs, your body is getting support directly from that medication. These medications work both centrally in your brain by suppressing appetite signals and modulating the reward centers that make you crave certain foods. And that's why a lot of people, especially my clients, have reported like having zero interest in a lot of food, which could be bad to some extent, especially when, you're clocking maybe only 600 calories a day. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that here soon, so stay tuned on if that's happened to you because it plays a big role in the potential of weight regain. But the GLP-1 medication is peripherally in your gut and organs, slowing down how quickly your stomach empties, and that improves how your cells respond to insulin. And therefore, you are regulating your hunger hormones like ghrelin. So they influence these neurotransmitter release mechanisms of your brain that control your hunger and how much energy you burn. So essentially, your body is getting external pharmacological support for appetite regulation, satiety signaling, and metabolic function. So it's basically like having training wheels on a bike. You're pretty much getting support artificially. So physiologically, when you stop, here's basically what happens. So when you stop abruptly, the appetite tends to spike while your metabolism lags behind. So this is what's creating a quote unquote perfect storm for rebound weight gain. So that's basically what I was kind of saying earlier. If you are somebody who's lost your appetite to the point where you're eating less than 1,400 calories a day as a grown ass woman, you are likely in a position where you could put that weight back on rapidly once you get off if you stopped cold turkey. Studies recently suggest that people may regain between 50 to 80% of their lost weight if they stop suddenly without a tapering plan or strategic support in place. And because I really want you to understand metabolism, I'm going to give you guys a little analogy that I usually give my nutrition clients to hopefully help you kind of understand why this metabolism lag can cause an issue, because this is exactly what we see for people who follow, maybe macros or caloric dieting where they're eating to exact calories every day, and then they hit a plateau, and then they get really hungry, and then they binge, and then they gain a bunch of weight really fast. So it works the same when it comes to this GLP-1 medication. So let's picture that you have a standard 12-ounce glass for water or for anything. You could put anything in it, but you have a 12-ounce glass. And your calories every day fill the glass to the top. So you're pouring water. Let's just say water is your calories in your day. Every day, your metabolism is churning because it knows it's getting 12 ounces of water. You're filling that cup to the top every day. It's happy. When you go into a deficit, so you're cutting your calories, which is what stimulates the body to access stored energy in your fat, you're giving your body less water. So let's say you're only giving it 8 ounces of water. So now your cup is like a little over 2/3 full or 3/4 full. And now your body is like, okay, well, in order to keep myself alive, I need to become metabolically, the homeostasis of how much I'm burning needs to be balanced so that I'm not chronically losing weight. Because if your body just responded to that deficit perpetually forever, you die. That's not a survival mechanism at all. Your cup would basically be needing so much more excess calories, and your body literally would run out of fuel to give it. So a protective mechanism is the cup gets smaller. So now all of a sudden you replace your 12-ounce cup with an 8-ounce cup. And now that cup is full to the top of the calories that you're giving it, which we'll say just you're filling it all the way up with 8 ounces of water. So let's say suddenly you have a really big meal. And so metaphorically, that would look like you're overpouring that little 8-ounce cup with 12 ounces of water again. And all that water is spilling out everywhere. It has nowhere to go. Therefore, that's a metaphor for all those excess calories. Your body decides to store them if you don't use them. So if you didn't have that big meal and then have a really energy expenditure-y day, like a big hike or a sports event or something like that, then your body's like, oh, you gave me all these extra calories. I'm going to store them away because maybe we're overeating so that we could use this again. And oftentimes too, when a body's been chronically starved, your body's like, hey, this is great. I have some excess. I might need this. So it doesn't really matter if to you it seems like you're still eating in a deficit. Like you might think like, okay, well, I used to eat 2,000 calories a day and now I'm only eating 1,400. Why am I not losing my weight? Or how did I gain weight? Because I only ate 1,600 calories instead of 1,400 calories, but I still am not eating 2,000 calories. Your metabolism is constantly shifting down the less you give it over time because it's keeping you alive. So basically with GLP-1 medications, your cup becomes like a 4-ounce cup becomes like a shot glass, essentially, because so many people basically aren't feeling hungry at all, usually for those who use like semaglutide, and they end up coming off the medication cold turkey. And guess what? Their appetite's back. They may only be eating again like 1,600 calories, but going from 500 or 600 calories every day to 1,600 calories is a massive surplus. And your metabolism hasn't caught back up yet. In the macro counting world, we call that a reverse diet. We would want to reverse diet somebody out of their lowest deficit caloric intake, slowly but surely. But when it comes to a GLP-1 medication, because it was artificially lowered and your appetite was managed exogenously, basically from a pharmaceutical, not naturally produced in your body, now you're suddenly eating in this massive surplus, even though it still doesn't feel like you're overeating. So this is where it gets really tricky for a lot of people. And I hope that that analogy kind of made sense to you. It's a little tricky because usually I can visually show you what I mean with the cups and the water, but it is something that is really important to know, that that's exactly why your weight regain is at high risk, because your metabolism is still lagging when your appetite might come back like full-fledged. So again, what that is your central nervous system being triggered, and compensatory responses to weight loss come into play. And that includes significant drops in energy expenditure, meaning you burn fewer calories at rest, and altered hunger signals. You feel hungrier more often. So that's kind of a perfect storm of massive weight regain, because your body is like, whoa, what am I doing? I guess this is what I'm supposed to do. Let's just store all these extra calories because we've been starving the last year or two. And this is called adaptive thermogenesis. Your body literally reduces the amount of energy it burns and increases your appetite signals as a biological response to weight loss. This is also something, interestingly, for all my females listening, our bodies respond to excess cardio the same way. We actually biologically don't like long distance cardio. Our body will shoot up ghrelin, our hunger hormone, immediately after cardio bouts to tell us, hey, that wasn't cool. You used too much stored glycogen and whatnot. And I need to store more because I need to be fertile and all these different things, for all of us who are premenopausal. But also another mechanism that may come in, or that tends to come in, is that when their digestion is speeding back up, since the GLP-1s slow your gastric emptying, previous symptoms like heartburn could return. So that's important to understand as well, is that your body's going to go through kind of this clunky phase of turning systems back on that were again, artificially slowed down. But it is exactly what your body is evolutionarily designed to do. It's there to protect you from what it perceives as starvation. Because unfortunately, that's one of the biggest things, that's the mechanism of why we lose fat so fast on GLP-1s, is that we are trying to access as much stored fat as possible to get it out of the body. It doesn't just disappear and you don't just pee or poop it out immediately. There's a whole process that goes into it. And when you are chronically undereating and also physiologically altered with the slowed gastric emptying, your body isn't even uptaking nutrients quite as much. And so that's why some people see, the hair loss in the beginning, or their nails get more brittle, their skin might look more dull. There's a lot of systems where your body, as it's burning all that excess fat, is also pulling these nutrients it's no longer getting from normal digestion and normal caloric intake, that it's no longer getting that. And so it has to pull it from your stores in your body. So it's really important to pay attention to keeping your body well nourished and taking good quality bioavailable supplements. And while you are on these medications, to help kind of offset that drain, unfortunately, that is inevitable with these medications. Because at the end of the day, it's basically your body just trying to keep you alive. It's trying to take the information that you're giving it and do something with it. And this whole information, weight loss is a stressful thing on the body. That's why it is not so easy, and why it takes a lot to stimulate it, especially if you are somebody who has been at a excess body fat size for prolonged time, for more than 5 years or so. Your body's made that its homeostasis. And so now that you're rapidly asking it to shed all this fat that's been stored, it's just trying to do its best to survive. So, something that's kind of interesting, that's a little bit of nuance. There is some encouraging data that I wanted to share with you guys. So, there's some emerging evidence from PubMed that I found on PubMed that weight regain might plateau below your pre-treatment weight in some people. And this suggests that the medication might shift your body's metabolic set point to some degree. So that's what I was talking about earlier as the metabolic set point being like the 12-ounce glass of water. We'll call that 2,000 calories. That is like your maintenance calories that if you ate that every day or close to that every day, you will stay the same exact weight. So your metabolic set point is like your body's happy place, whether or not you like it. Sometimes that's not up to you, but that is something that is interesting, is that for those who maybe shed 120 pounds of fat over 2 years or so on this med, your metabolic set point may now be lower and to what your body has decided as a healthier body weight. So maybe let's say you got down to 145 pounds. Now your body's set point is maybe 175, 180. You previously were like 250 pounds or something like that, right? The math did not math there. It didn't do 120 pounds. But that was just for kind of an example of how, you may have started in the upper 200s and you got yourself down to like the 150s, which is nuts. And you really want to stay there, but then you want to get off the med at the same time. And you got off the med and now your body just wants to go back to like 175. That's kind of a realistic expectation that may happen. And it is great that your set point is actually in a healthier body, weight for yourself. But at the same time, it may not be as low as you got because you were, artificially rigging your body's hunger and metabolic system. But one other piece of interesting data is that weight regain is often slower and less dramatic in the real world data than what early clinical trials suggested. Possibly because people in real world continue pursuing weight management through other means like diet changes, exercise, or switching to different medications. But that is helpful because some of the clinical trials kind of overstated what can happen. But likely, I would say from my experience, regaining that rapidly likely comes from somebody who just took the med, didn't change any of their lifestyle habits that got them there in the first place, came off the med, didn't change anything. And so, of course, you're just going to go right back to what you were before. So paying attention to building habits, which we're going to talk more about here soon, is what's going to really move the needle for you. Or rather, keep the needle where it's at or as close to where it's at. Okay, so now for the weaning down conversation, how to come off strategically. So this is the part that you probably have been waiting for. Okay, so if you and your provider decided it's time to come off your GLP-1, how you do it matters a lot if you have not, kind of already gathered that from the previous chat. Experts recommend a gradual tapering approach, typically over about 2 months at least. And this is what I personally have found to be a good strategy for my own clientele who have tapered off these alongside their provider and me. We've all kind of been this like circle of health. I've always talked in my previous episodes about having a care team, and this is where that's really helpful. And this approach for tapering down allows your appetite to slowly increase while your metabolism has time to catch up. So similar to like I was saying about the reverse dieting thing, this is essentially a strategy that is like reverse dieting. And this measured approach has proven to be successful in clinical practice. So a gradual reduction might look like this. You're on weekly injections. You might reduce your dose about a quarter every 2 to 4 weeks, giving your body some time to adjust at each step, and then moving it down to the most minimum dose. And then you could also separate those doses every other week. So you start to really reduce gently your injections. So instead of yanking the support away all at once, which triggers that perfect storm that we had talked about earlier. Tapering gives your body's natural hunger and satiety systems time to recalibrate. So think of that like slowly removing those training wheels instead of ripping them off while you're mid ride. That's probably the best way to think about it. So, physiologically, what you should expect of what happens during tapering is that you'll want to monitor closely for those changes in your blood sugar, especially if you have had any insulin resistance or metabolic issues. Again, this is not for diabetics. So, we're talking about more specifically anybody who used it without diabetes for weight loss. Those appetite patterns, pay attention to how they're shifting, your energy levels, and your overall well being. Some practitioners will use like oral appetite suppressants or other supportive medications during the tapering phase to like bridge the gap. But I wouldn't consider that cheating. It's really strategic medicine, honestly, especially if you want to have the best success possible. So that's something worth talking about with one of your practitioners. But I'm not a huge fan, of continuing a lot more appetite suppressant because that are prescription based. There are some natural GLP-1 supportive supplements on the market now. There's, I believe, the company Pendulum makes a really great one if you have a practitioner on FullScript, which soon my listeners can go to my website and join my FullScript to order high quality supplements because I do not trust Amazon anymore for supplements since some of my clients have gotten dupes of like even trusted brands like Pure Encapsulations that somebody swapped out and made fake ones and gave them like sugar pills. It's like a whole mess. So I do not trust Amazon. And they're not like the only story. I keep hearing this like time and again. So definitely always like side note, always order your supplements from a higher quality, like regulated company like FullScript, something like that, or directly from the supplement company themselves. But pairing a supplement that naturally stimulates GLP-1 production in your own body, because we make this peptide in our body. So this is why it reacts in our body so well exogenously, is because it is something that our body can create and usually does create, but it tends to get a little less effective and get less stimulated by modern lifestyles and eating habits and all that kind of stuff. But it's also important to note that regular follow-up appointments are essential during this window so that your provider can assess your progress and make adjustments to your plan as needed, because that's really important to make sure you stay up on with professional help. So your strategy is going to be best to be done as tapering and under the guidance of a professional. But, I also want to add, before we talk about like the strategy game plan, some people may need to stay on this medication long term, and that's like completely valid and appropriate depending on your situation. So know your unique situation, and that's why I'm always saying, it's not just a disclaimer to cover my ass. It's like legitimately your practitioner should know you the best. It is one of those things where they do monitor you as an individual. They order your blood work, all that kind of stuff. Well, hopefully. I know not everybody has high quality practitioners, so definitely advocate for yourself when it comes to picking a practitioner, if possible, for yourself that really does care about you. That is why I'm a big fan of functional medicine practitioners, naturopathic doctors, like good quality ones that actually have accreditation that you can find. And it is always going to be out of pocket, but healthcare is sick care. It's there for you when you need it in an emergency or in bigger situations or chronic situations. But I would say paying out of pocket and budgeting for a few sessions a year with a naturopathic doctor will run you maybe $500 for the year. And it can be a world's difference for having a person who actually has the time and capacity to pay attention to you, run better quality tests, etc. But anyways, off that tangent, it's really important to know that if you have to stay on this med longer because you were somebody who is in a situation where you were over 100 pounds overweight, then that may put you in a category where, the obesity is a chronic situation. And if you have to stay on this med at lowest effective dose long term, that's okay. We are still learning a lot more about what that means and how to take care of yourself. So perhaps I will do some research as we continue to gather better research on that as more people are on it long term. and make a new episode for those of you who may be in that position, because I think it is really important to better understand that situation because it is pretty unique. And for some people, kind of maybe discouraging and maybe a little scary. You know what I mean? So that others may taper successfully and some may switch to different medications. Some may use these medications intermittently. Like you may come back to it short term with a small, like microdosing situation just to kind of help yourself stay at a better weight, whatever it is. There's no one size fits all, unfortunately. So attempting to DIY your dosing without medical supervision can be genuinely dangerous. So this is why I, again, am kind of saying this little blurb here about why it's so important to work with a practitioner, whether it's a GP or a qualified naturopathic or functional medicine practitioner. All right. So let's get into the strategies. Here's what the research and clinical practice tells us actually works in this situation. So, number one, you need to be working on your foundation before you stop your medication. So, not only does it help you lose more weight while you're on the medication, it also helps you maintain more lean muscle mass, which keeps your metabolism stronger. Like any time you lose weight, like there was a lot of fear mongering about losing too much muscle on this medication, can happen. Usually that's people who are not consuming enough protein and not moderately strength training. And it can be hard because from real life experience, my clients in the first few months of using it, their bodies are shifting into managing blood sugars differently and energy systems in general. And therefore, their muscles feel like freaking exhausted. I don't know if that was you too, but for those clients that had foundational strength training and utilized the med to just finally move the needle on their really, really stubborn metabolic fat, their strength didn't feel so good the first few months. But that shouldn't be something discouraging. Come back to it if you've been on the med for a while now and work yourself into it. Try to make sure to eat food around when you work out. You want some protein and some carbs so that you can give your body the glycogen for energy. And you want to be well hydrated. That is one of the biggest things that I see people do wrong on these meds is not hydrate well enough and or drink mineral water or spring water. You know, that is one of your best friends for keeping your body well hydrated in a way that supports movement because you're going to sweat and you need to replenish those minerals and just, you know, your body needs water. You're mostly water. You're mostly a watery meat suit blob. So you need to make sure that you do that because of the slowed gastric emptying and the metabolically expensive system of utilizing fat, you're going to be dehydrating naturally much faster. So while you are prepping a little timeline, I would definitely say make a timeline of when you want to stop and work backwards from there. Make sure you start to establish those foundational habits that are essential for maintaining a healthy body and lifestyle in general, which would look more like strength training at least 2 times a week. It could be micro workouts a few more times a week, or it could be 2 40-minute workouts with strength. I was saying strength. I'm just like sprinkling strength in there because that's so important. Your muscle is your metabolism. If you don't build muscle, you're not going to have like shape on your body, longevity in your bones. There's so many things that muscle is necessary for. Also establishing healthy protein, good amount of fiber from produce dominantly, and whole grain carbs or, you know, less heavily starchy carbs at first, because those are going to be your simple sugars and they are going to store as fat a little faster. Not to say it in a way to scare you away from carbs, because carbs do not immediately just become fat, but they are one of the quicker sugars that your body will store. So if you want to be strategic, try to fill your plate almost a little more paleo. If you're postmenopausal, you could shift into more of sort of a ketogenic or animal-based diet temporarily with more heavily protein-based with water-soluble fiber that usually comes from vegetables and all that. Focus into that for a while so you have that to focus into, and your body will have a lot harder time depositing excess fat again if you listen to the tapering method and slowly reintroduce these foods and the overall calories more slowly. But this is really essential for you to do before coming off the med or during it, because it's going to be hard while you are tapering off the medication to you're going to have those cravings come back in slowly, and you're going to have your appetite come in a little bit more. And so when you have these patterns and habits into your routine that support a healthier body composition than before you got on the med, they are going to help you have better success, and you won't have to stress about trying to establish these new habits while coming off the med and dealing with the side effects. A pro tip that I would say could be really useful is look in your area if there's somewhere that does an in-body scan or a DEXA scan or a bod pod. Those are all very minimally invasive ways to get a good picture of your body composition. And I would do that before, like as you start your taper down, and then periodically, like every maybe 6 to 12 weeks, somewhere in there, depending on your budget for it. Some places like in-body scans are free. In-body scans are going to be the least accurate of those that I just listed because they are what's called bioelectrical impedance. So it's estimating fat based off of, like, it could read body water as fat sometimes. So on average, they're about 5% off. However, if you take a scan and you do it in the morning, fasted, same time of the day, every time you get a scan, you're still going to have an accurate representation of how you're shifting. So if you want to go what's often a free route, in-body scans are usually offered for free at different medical offices or gym spaces and all that kind of stuff. A lot of gyms tend to have one as a selling point. So, check out your gym, find out if they have that. The little handheld body fat readers are always super inaccurate. They are also bioelectrical impedance, but they only shoot through like your arms and your trunk, and they estimate your lower body. And I never find that to be anywhere close to accurate for my female clients because most of us are bottom heavy by genetics and by, our hormones. We hold more body fat typically in our glutes and our thighs and lower belly, etc. So usually you're going to get an inaccurate read. But getting a comprehensive body composition analysis before you start your tapering down and periodically throughout can really help you set those metabolic goals and go beyond just the number on the scale, because a lot of people focus on that too much and you can really miss what's going on. Because if you're building or maintaining some muscle mass, you're going to see the scale go up, but it's actually you gaining a positive health marker instead of just gaining weight. Okay, so as far as nutrition, because I'm sure you're listening and you're like, okay, well, what do I eat? What are the most important recommendations? And I could give you a whole laundry list of dietary recommendations, and I'm going to give you a little bit more tips than just this. But the one thing is always prioritize protein, because it is much harder to turn protein into stored body fat than any other macronutrient on your plate. And it's going to fill you up, and it's also going to support so many other systems because those amino acids support everything from muscle mass to neurotransmitters. So aim for 1 to 1.2 grams of protein per kilogram of your ideal weight body. So if you're in the US, like I am, we go by pounds. So 1 pound is equal to 2.2 kilograms. So do the math for yourself there. So that's, for example, somebody targeting 150 pounds, that's 68 kilograms. So roughly you want to aim for 70 to 80 grams per day of protein. I tend to find most of my adult females, when you're fully tapered off or mostly tapered off, like you've shifted to shots every other week and it's at a very low dose, 100 to 140 grams of protein is going to be the best for you to aim for maximum muscle retention, appetite suppression, blood sugar regulation, and overall mood stability. So it sounds like a lot, but just take that, separate it into however many meals of the day you want to eat. I do recommend you tend to find maybe like a whey isolate protein that is typically good for anybody who's sensitive to dairy, because it's just the whey protein isolated. There's no lactose in any of that. I always recommend you do spring a little bit more for the high quality stuff. There's also a protein company that I've been loving lately that is not creamy protein. It's kind of more like juice. It's called Grams, Gramms. They make a lemonade, a peach black tea, and a strawberry acai. I had the strawberry acai earlier today. I love that one. It's super easy to chug down. And with protein shakes, you do always want to chug it. You don't want to sip it throughout the day. Okay. So that should make it a little less daunting for you to get higher protein in throughout your day, because you're not just going to like want to sit there and chomp on a chicken breast. Like we've all been there and it always sucks. So try to get a little creative with your protein sources. If you're plant-based or you just can't do dairy, Sprout Living is a fantastic protein resource, but similarly to the other ones, mix it fast and chug it. Plant protein especially becomes kind of like jellified when it sits too long. So it's really like gross. So I highly recommend with plant-based proteins, mix it, chug it, call it a day. But yes, ultimately we're trying to maintain and build muscle back in to help your metabolism picture, to keep that metabolic burn high as possible, since you no longer have the aid of the medication. So 20 to 35 grams of protein per meal is going to be your best bet, because the more muscle you have, the higher your resting metabolic rate, like I said. So if you lose the muscle, you're going to make it a lot harder for your body to maintain that weight loss unless you work on putting it back. And protein is essential because it's the building blocks of muscle. Everybody knows that. If you don't, now you know. Aside from protein, what else can I do? So emphasize high fiber foods alongside. So they also support natural satiety as the medication wears off. A lot of the times, it is where you're going to support natural GLP-1 production. So in the supplements I was talking about earlier, that is usually what is involved to help stimulate natural GLP-1 production. Practice portion awareness and mindful eating. So if you need kind of like a reframe on portion sizes, Precision Nutrition has some really great graphics online to help you kind of get a better idea of portion sizes. And, it's the whole like palm of your hand and a thumb and this or that. If that helps you kind of get back into understanding portion awareness, that's great, because likely one of the kind of dark side effects of GLP-1 use is that you may have this kind of distorted understanding of portion because you probably were eating really tiny portions, which is kind of the opposite of what we're used to. But then sometimes when you're getting off of it and you have hunger again and you go out to a restaurant and you get served what really is 3 portions on a plate for you, you might need to recalibrate how you view portions. So that'll be really important to do. Keep regular eating schedules. So you're managing those hunger satiety hormones. That's also going to help them recalibrate. So try your best to eat within the same 2-hour window every day. Ideally, 3 meals a day is best for metabolic function, because it's giving your body a dose of food, so to speak, time to digest and sort that food out, and then another dose, sort it out, another dose, and then a long fast where it can sort out your food and then also work on other things in your body once it's done with that while you're sleeping. That's called cellular autophagy, and other things that are important about not eating in a maybe 10 to 12-hour window in the evening. A natural fast is when you're sleeping post dinner. So 3 meals a day is best for that. But if you're somebody who needs to work in little tiny meals because that's what you've been used to, that's totally okay. But again, just try to focus on 20 grams of protein every single meal if you do 4 to 5 meals a day. If you're doing 3 meals a day, ideally 30 to 40 grams of protein every meal is going to be your best bet. And as always, nothing new here, guys. Nutrient-dense food, whole foods. Plenty of vegetables, good fruits with fiber, lean proteins, whole grains, all that good stuff. That's always going to be your best bet for re-nourishing your body naturally and supporting it naturally. I kind of already discussed the importance of the strength training and muscle when talking about the protein. So I just want to basically say that it is really important to resistance train at any capacity, even if that's in a pool, water aerobics, or, exercise outside, or in the gym, or in a class, any of those things. If you can add resistance to your bones and your muscles that's going to be very beneficial for keeping the excess weight from creeping back in quickly. Because when you're resistance training, your muscles recovering is basically telling your body, like, oh no, I'm using this. I'm going to prioritize building this muscle back up so I can use it again because clearly I need it, versus like, oh yeah, take amino acids from me. I don't really need it, which is basically what happens when you don't strength train. So finding a way to strength train relatively consistently is going to always be a smart strategy for longevity, especially in this instance. And like beyond structured exercise, all movement counts, guys. So housework, walking while talking on calls, parking further away. That's one of my favorite like weird hacks. It really did come from like dieting culture, but in reality, nowadays, people view walking in the middle of the day for 20 minutes as a break from their desk as exercise, and that's not. That is just daily movement. It is not exercise. You cannot count that towards exercise, unfortunately. So I just kind of want to like point that out because a lot of us think like, oh yeah, well, I went on a walk today. It's like, okay, well, your body actually required that. It requires a walk every day at least. Not even, it actually requires more than that. So if you can find more ways to move more throughout your day, that's going to be very beneficial for you because sedentary is, you're only burning calories of keeping your system alive, and our bodies tend to get really efficient at that, especially if you're at a lower weight, because less mass means you're less metabolically active typically, which means that you are not burning as many calories as you might think just existing. Most people, I would say, when they get under the 160-pound zone with like moderate muscle mass or low to average muscle mass, their basal metabolic rate, which is, the calories that you burn from just being alive all day, is only like 1,200 calories, guys. So you really have to consider finding some structured exercise or increasing your movement throughout your day in other ways, like taking the stairs, playing with your kids or your pets, all that kind of stuff. Those do add up and they play a big role, especially if you're somebody with a desk job. You just have to be a little more intentional about that. A lot of my clients have been so obsessed with their walking pads. And it's funny because everybody's on the fence about them. They're like, I don't know if I'd really use it, or it's going to be really hard to this or that. And then they get it and they're like, oh my God, I'm so obsessed and I'm getting so many more steps throughout my day, or at least I'm moving. And so even if it's not perfect exercise or structured exercise, rather, it still can help you keep your blood flowing and your body moving and helping manage your blood sugar. So it's a really good strategy that I think is a lot easier because those walking pads are not very expensive anymore either. So the next component that is going to be essential is that you pay attention to quality sleep. Sleep is medicine. Sleep deprivation literally disrupts leptin, which is your satiety hormone, and your ghrelin, your hunger hormone. So poor sleep will make you hungrier and less satisfied by food, unfortunately. So you really want to try your best to aim for that 7 to 9 hours of quality sleep consistently for females. Females, on average, need more sleep, half an hour to an hour or half an hour to 2 hours more than the average male. So sleep is really essential, especially for managing excess body fat gain and so much more. The next one is your stress management. It's not optional. So chronic stress, it elevates your cortisol, as I intimately know, unfortunately, and it takes a long time to manage that. And so if you had chronic stress, elevated and chronic belly fat gain, which is part of what made you start the GLP-1 med, let's say like you usually put a bunch of excess fat in your belly region and you just couldn't get it to budge. Unfortunately, some of the mechanisms at which GLP-1s operate can keep that stressed state alive because, again, you're going into a stressful fat loss zone. And unfortunately, we're kind of trying to figure out how this mechanism, when you are coming off the medication, reacts with your visceral fat accumulation. So all that deep belly fat around your organs, because visceral fat comes in, guys, when your body is in such a chronically stressed state that you have long-term elevated cortisol, and cortisol wants quick energy. The quickest way to get that energy, your adrenal glands are sitting above your kidneys in the middle of your trunk, essentially. When those are asking for energy quickly, your body starts to deposit fat in the visceral fat region, which is, again, deep belly fat around your organs. And therefore, it can kind of get out of hand if your stress management is not improved at all. So, part of the foundational stuff that you should work on before coming off the med is navigate where in your life are you still dealing with the same stressors and at the same level or more than you were before starting the med. Because likely that may be the reason that you put on all that belly fat that was really stubborn. So, therapy, meditation, breath work, movement, creative outlets, delegating, for a lot of my other, working professional women, high achievers, if you are not delegating out things that are draining you or causing you more stress, so to speak, that's something that should become a priority. Find how you can take things off your plate, and or ask for help more often. Sometimes it's just as easy as that. You can delegate it to your family members. Usually like your partner, it's really underrated as like just thinking that like, oh, it's more impressive when I do it all, or the horribly toxic mindset of like, I I don't like how they do it, so I'm going to do it myself so that I don't have to do it again anyways. Okay, well, that's very disempowering for your partner. And it's also just kind of showing that you just don't want to relinquish control over that. Your partner can absolutely take it over, or you could possibly hire somebody else who is better at it than you, or just as good, like a good quality housekeeper or something like that. You know what I mean? Um, Find ways to do that for yourself, because the investment you just spent on this medication and the time you invested is going to be worth you possibly budgeting and reinvesting some of that money you're no longer going to be spending on the GLP-1 into these other resources to help your overall stress load, like ordering groceries to your house, or a housekeeper, or a nanny for a little bit more time so you have some time to go to the gym. Think about it that way. That's something I've actually talked to several clients about, reframing the fact that, okay, you were spending 500 to a grand a month on this medication. You're no longer going to be spending that, but you found a way to spend that much on something for your health, right? So how else can you reorient even just some of that back into your life that supports your health in a different way? So I hope that's a really helpful reframe, because I think that's really key to think about when you are trying to transition off these meds, because a lot of people are looking forward to, saving all that money. But at the same time, you're probably going to have a harder time not regaining all that weight that you did before if you haven't changed any other component in your life. Some people may actually benefit from reorienting like a third of how much you were spending on that medication every month into a personal trainer or a small group training. That might be a really worthwhile way for you to continue to budget that money as an investment in yourself. So I could go on that for days, but we're not going to. This last part of this section that's important to think about is how this transition is not just physical, it's deeply emotional and psychological. So getting support as you come off or before is super important, because there's a lot of research that backs this, but also from personal experience. Coaching and behavioral support are super crucial during this transition, because you need to have somebody who can help you navigate these high risk situations like dining out, vacations, holidays, stress eating triggers, etc. So you will significantly improve in your outcome if you have a support team, or at least a support person. So even if you can't afford a coach or another practitioner or any of that kind of stuff, it would be helpful for you to maybe have a buddy and like somebody who's like on the same page as you, in the sense of they might be your most like go-getter friend, or they're really invested in your success as well. I can say not best to just go with your friend who is at the same motivation level as you, because sometimes you can, unfortunately, like misery loves company it, where you may end up just kind of being like, I don't want to walk today. Or how about you? Nah, I don't want to walk either. Okay, we're not going to walk today. We'll do it tomorrow. And then you guys like never walk. So that's why you want to find a friend, if you can't afford a coach, that is very like not going to let you make excuses and all that kind of stuff. But it's also important for you to find psychological support, potentially like counseling or like CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, because it can be particularly effective in helping you develop healthier thought patterns around food, manage cravings, cope with the emotional eating, maintain motivation, etc. So I highly recommend, if you're somebody who came into using this med struggling with any sort of like maybe even eating disorder, binge eating, or psychological reason that you gained a lot of this weight, really, really, really encourage you to have some empathy for yourself and not and release that shame behind getting psychological support, because it can be such a game changer for you. And if you've tried therapists in the past that were like not great, that didn't feel helpful, there are so many other ones that can fit well with you that you just have to explore around and kind of take inventory on how you experience them. I had used a therapist once, like around when my grandmother passed, from that company called Better Health or Better Help, one of those. Unfortunately, I was not a big fan at all. It felt like I was practically coaching her in the sense that like she just sounded like she was going through the motions. That's probably because it was a lower cost therapy and it was telehealth. And so, unfortunately, you kind of get what you pay for when it comes to coaches and practitioners. Some people, I'm sure they can find fantastic people on sites like that are more affordable. So I'm not going to say like don't try them, but I'm just going to say that sometimes it takes you looking outside of the box and in different situations, Googling, food therapy specialists around me, that kind of thing. But I'll wrap up this whole section with kind of saying, challenge your thoughts. So it's really important to work on identifying and challenging those negative thought patterns that you've been conditioned to believe about your body or your worth, what success looks like, aka being skinny. If you're anybody who's been raised between, 70s, 80s, 90s, unfortunately, I mean, honestly, throughout the entire 1900s for women, unfortunately, it really shifted to basically look like you're starving, and that's success. Most of us, like I was a 90s kid, so I was raised around Victoria's Secret models and all that kind of stuff. Those things that have been put into our head by diet culture, it's done a number on all of us. And so unlearning that and reprogramming is part of this work. So that's really essential that you explore for maybe the first time ever or just coming back to it again, especially with professional help, can really help you move forward and break the patterns that got you to where you were before you started this journey. So I'm going to do a bonus little episode for you guys following this on what to do if you do regain, because I think that's going to be really important, and I'd love to do a separate little episode on it for you. So stay tuned for that, because I want to kind of talk you through what to do when you regain some weight, because it probably will happen, but don't freak out. As long as you're following a lot of what I gave you in this episode, you are going to be pretty set. But I will say that not everybody's body follows, what they're finding in clinical trials or research. And I have seen various things happen through my clientele, but most of my clientele has established a fitness routine, enjoys movement, and feels even better now that they've finally gotten to move some of that excess fat that was so stubborn, and also supporting their nutrition. And sometimes there's that kind of synergy of, okay, I feel better in my body. I want to take better care of it. And so I hope that that's where you land on your journey ending GLP-1 therapy, because it can really become such a game changer for the future of your health. And it can really make or break, your health picture down the line, and how you go into menopause and how you age when you're into your 60s, 70s, 80s. So here's my reminders of your action steps as we close this out. If you're currently on a GLP-1 and thinking about stopping, don't DIY this. Schedule a conversation with your prescriber. Start working on your protein intake and resistance training right now. Consider working with a health coach or therapist alongside your medical provider. And if you've already stopped and are navigating the aftermath, extend yourself a lot of compassion, first of all, because I know this is so hard to do. Assess where you need support. Is it your nutrition? Is it your movement? Is it your mental health, your community? And remember that restarting medication is always an option if you need it. And be gentle on yourself. Don't try to rush it. Don't try to do some massive dose to try to quickly take off everything that you put back on. Not smart. Lowest effective dose is always going to be the most important. But again, not medical advice. Work with your practitioner for your individual body. but it's okay if you do have to go back on it for a little bit and then you follow what we've outlined in this episode to help yourself avoid that rebound again. Because maybe you were listening and you're like, crap, I totally am experiencing the quote unquote perfect storm situation. So, and it's okay. You're not alone at all. This is happening all the time. But do know your health journey is not a straight line. It's not supposed to be. There will be seasons where you need more support, seasons where you need less, and seasons where you need different types of support altogether. So the goal is not perfection. The goal is showing up for yourself with curiosity, compassion, and a willingness to advocate for what your body needs, even when that changes over time. So if you're navigating this transition and you want personalized support, feel free to reach out to me if you need a little bit more advice or you want me to direct you in the direction of a great practitioner that I trust that could help you. And if this episode resonated with you, please share it with somebody who might need to hear it. Throw it up on your story. I would absolutely love that. And if you haven't done it already, I would love for you to take a moment and rate the podcast as it helps us grow and get a little bit more exposure. But that's it for today's episode, Rebels. Celebrate your strength and nourishment, walk with confidence, and I will catch you in a few more weeks on another episode of Rebel Wellness. All right, Rebel, that's another episode in the books. If you're sitting there thinking, oh my God, this actually makes sense now, do me a favor, screenshot this episode, tag me at Kaileigh Loren or at Rebel Wellness Podcast on Instagram, and tell me which piece hit different. Your aha moments literally make my entire week. Want more of this energy? Jump on my newsletter where I spill the tea on everything from blood work interpretation to why your cravings aren't a character flaw. It's the unfiltered stuff that would make this episode 3 hours long. So if you want more of that, join our newsletter on my website, coachkales.com. And listen, if this show is becoming your weekly dose of someone finally gets it, please smash that 5-star rating on Spotify or please drop us a review on Apple Podcast. It helps us grow and expand and share more education with more women like you who need it. You know, it's really important that we support our sisters. Real talk though, disclaimer time, I'm dropping knowledge, not prescriptions. Everything here is educational. I'm not diagnosing, treating, or replacing your healthcare team. Think of me as your research-obsessed bestie who happens to know a lot more about hormones, gut health, and all the good stuff than your hairdresser or that random health guru that you're not quite sure if you should trust her background. Keep questioning the status quo, keep trusting your body's wisdom, and keep showing up for yourself. You're doing better than you think, and I'll be right here cheering you on. Catch you next week.